In 2002, a British man disappeared during what was reported as a canoeing accident at sea and was later declared dead. His wife later received substantial insurance payouts after he was declared dead, reported at roughly $250,000 in total. Nearly 6 years later, in December 2007, he walked into a police station alive. The disappearance was tied to Seaton Carew on the North Sea coast, where the incident was treated as a fatal loss at sea. A canoe went out, the canoe was later recovered, and no body was found. The case moved from search to legal process, a death registered, a death certificate issued, and the paperwork became the ending everyone accepted. The missing man was John Darwin, a former prison officer. He went canoeing off the coast near Seaton Carew in March 2002, often reported as 21 March 2002. Witnesses later described rough water and a grey sky. Local police, Cleveland Police and rescue services responded, and the RNLI searched the sea. Searchers later recovered his canoe, but no body was found. With no confirmed remains, the case shifted from the shoreline to the registry. He was later legally declared presumed dead, allowing a death to be registered and a death certificate to be issued. The sea gave investigators almost nothing, and that absence became the foundation for everything that followed. His wife, Anne Darwin, remained in the family home in Seaton Carew as the disappearance became a local story and reporters came to the street. Court records later listed debts and missed payments, and the mortgage still required monthly payments. Court evidence showed Anne Darwin made insurance claims after he was declared presumed dead, and the payouts were later reported at roughly $250,000 in total. The money did not arrive dramatically. It arrived through ordinary financial channels, alongside the ordinary pressure of bills. On the doorstep, sympathy and paperwork sat side by side. Public sympathy was visible. But the official record was what mattered. John Darwin had been legally declared presumed dead, and the death was registered with a death certificate issued. Court documents later described financial pressure and a plan to start again abroad. In that period, Anne Darwin continued living in Seaton Carew while the community repeated the same explanation, a canoeing accident at sea, with no body recovered. On paper, she was a widow, and that status shaped what could be claimed, paid, and planned. The story sounded settled, even as the documents pointed to something still in motion. Behind the public story, court evidence showed John Darwin was not missing in the way people believed. Evidence presented later described him hiding for a time in or near the family home, including concealed living arrangements. While the official record treated him as dead, he remained close enough to avoid detection, and neighbours later told reporters they never suspected anything. The contrast is the point. A man could be legally dead, a death certificate could exist, and yet he could still be living within the same everyday routines that made the street feel normal. Plan needed a new name, and prosecutors presented evidence that John Darwin used a false identity in financial and travel arrangements. According to reporting later supported by court proceedings, they spoke about leaving England behind. Paperwork became the mechanism. Documents, applications and records that could open accounts and enable travel, while the official record still listed him as dead. And yet, for a time, life in Seaton Carew continued in plain sight. The same street, the same neighbours, while the administrative trail moved in a different direction. On December 3rd, 2007, John Darwin walked into a London police station and identified himself as John Darwin. He claimed he had amnesia and could not account for the years since his disappearance in 2002. Police took his details and began checking records, which included the fact that he had been legally declared presumed dead and had a death certificate on file. That meant his name did not just match a missing person report, it matched a registered death. In administrative terms, a dead man had just asked to be processed as living. The amnesia claim met paperwork. Officers checked records, and the name matched a death certificate tied to a man who had been legally declared presumed dead. The case file also carried the earlier search details, including that the canoe had been recovered and no body found. The story moved quickly into newsrooms, and British media replayed the canoe image while reporters gathered outside the Darwin home in Seaton Carew. Police interviews began and were later summarised in court. The question was no longer just how someone survived. It was how a registered death and the financial consequences that followed could be undone. On the surface, the setting was ordinary: a street, a building, daily life continuing. But investigators followed travel and financial trails, comparing dates, documents, and accounts to test the canoeing accident narrative against recorded activity. That kind of work is procedural and specific. Timelines, transactions, and travel records either align or they don't. A canoe story cannot survive a passport stamp, a hotel booking, or a camera flash when those records point somewhere else. Prosecutors said Anne helped plan the disappearance and shared the insurance money. The fraud case relied on bank records, property dealings, and statements tested in court. Sentencing remarks in UK court described deception over years, not days. The couple had discussed starting a new life overseas. They had arranged finances around a death that never happened. The most damaging detail was simple: he never drowned. In 2008, John Darwin was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison. Anne Darwin was sentenced to 6 years and 6 months. The figures were reported widely and recorded in court coverage. Prison is not cinematic. It is metal doors. It is disinfectant smell. It is fluorescent glare at dawn. Courts pursued recovery of the proceeds of the fraud, including insurance payouts, through confiscation and repayment orders. The story also created victims without headlines. Their sons faced questions in the street. Family trust became evidence, read aloud in court. Why do it? Court reporting and later interviews pointed to debt, fear, and control. The plan relied on a plausible scenario: a canoeing accident at sea, and on the fact that in March 2002, no body was found, even though the canoe was recovered. That absence allowed him to be legally declared presumed dead, with a death registered and a death certificate issued, and it set the conditions for later insurance claims and reported payouts of roughly $250,000 in total. But the same system that records a death also preserves records that can be checked later: documents, accounts, and other traces that remain on land. The case remains a warning. Death is a legal status, and proof is harder to drown.